Hi, everybody. I'm Belinda McCauley. I'm the Executive Director of the Beverly Hills Bar Association and the Beverly Hills Bar Foundation. Thank you all so much for coming today. This is co-hosted by the Beverly Hills Bar Foundation and the BHBA Barristers, which is our Young Lawyers section. And if you are on the call and a law student or a lawyer in your first 8 years of practice and you aren't already engaged with the barristers, I'd encourage you to do that. And if you want information about other charitable activities from the Beverly Hills Bar Foundation does some great work, free legal clinics with the community service projects, some of which, though, have been sidelined because of COVID. The San Michelle Homeless Shelter didn't reopen for our in-person events that we do once a month. The free legal clinic also hasn't been able to operate because the facilities have been closed. And so we, along with, I think, many of you, have been looking for opportunities to be helpful, to help the community, in many cases remotely or in a way that we can volunteer and still maintain social distance, make sure that we're keeping ourselves and other people safe. And Get Out the Shot LA is just a fantastic way to do that. So I took this training, became a volunteer, and was so excited about it that I've been telling people at the bar about it, and am so thrilled to have our two speakers here today to tell us more. So Liz Schwandt is one of the co-founders of Get Out the Shot LA, and the amount that she's done since January in standing up this volunteer effort is really amazing. She's going to tell you a bit about that. But the genesis of this is we have access, at least theoretically, for so much of our population, but there are pre-existing barriers and concerns about equity. There are transportation issues. There are language barriers. There are lack of information limitations, all of which are keeping some folks in particularly underserved communities in LA County from getting vaccinated. So Liz will talk about how she and some colleagues and a bunch of volunteers are trying to connect those people who really want to get vaccinated with those resources. And then Melissa Wolf is a practicing attorney. She's in-house at a studio. She's an entertainment lawyer. And this has become her volunteer passion in the past few months. So she's also done the Get Out the Shot LA training and has helped more than 200 people get vaccinated. So she's going to tell us about her experience and give some tips from her perspective. But with that, I don't want to take any more time away from the speakers that you're here to hear from. So please do feel free throughout the presentation to use the Q&A feature if you have any questions. If you can drop those in Q&A as opposed to chat, it's easier for us to track. And I will flag down Liz or Melissa or whoever's talking if we've got a question that I can't answer with a link or something simple in the comments. And if not, we'll leave time at the end as well. But do feel free throughout the presentation because we want this to be, as interactive as possible. And if your question is related to something that's being discussed, then please feel free to pop it in the Q&A. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Liz.
Wonderful. I am really happy to be here. Belinda, I was so happy that you reached out and to be on a panel with Melissa, who has been chugging along with us for a while. It feels really special, and I feel really lucky to be here. So I'm going to start by talking about the founding of Get Out the Shot, and it is a story that starts with my own just smugness. I'm going to be very honest about it. It is what happened is I had been thinking about vaccination and access to vaccination for the staff at my school. My day job is I run a child development center. We have 120 families. I have 30 staff. And so I don't know if any of you have ever tried to socially distance from a 2-year-old, and it is not possible. And so the level of body care that we do on a day-to-day basis, I've been doing everything I could to keep my staff, my kids, and their families safe during COVID. I built a PCR testing lab on my campus because I'm, a nut. But so the ideas of COVID safety, especially for folks that lived in areas that were more highly impacted by COVID has been top of mind for me. So I was watching when childcare providers were going to be eligible. And in early January, mid-January, I found that one of my teachers, one of my staff members, was eligible early through a Department of Developmental Services waiver that qualified her as a healthcare provider for her daughter. And so I saw this and my eyes lit up and I was so excited and I ran up to her classroom and I went and I told her, you can get this. And then here's where my smugness came in. I said, you're busy with your daughter and with working and everything. Let me just book this appointment for you. So I marched back down to my office where I have good internet and lots of time. And if I don't want someone to bother me, they don't bother me. And I've been working with the Department of Public Health very closely all during COVID because they've been such a partner for those of us who are working in person with children. And I thought, I can do this. I'm a great systems navigator. And it took me over 20 attempts to get and secure an appointment for her, despite the fact that she was eligible. So in this moment, this ton of bricks fell on me that went, oh, eligibility and access are not the same thing. And I thought, if I am taking care of her in this way, who is taking care of her mother, her grandmother, her great uncle? And then I thought about all of these folks in my neighborhood. I live in a great neighborhood in Los Angeles called Lincoln Heights. For those, not to age myself too much, but it's my street is the one where Lincoln High School is, which is the rival high school in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. That always delights me. The one everyone's afraid to play. Like, that's where I live. So my neighborhood, Lincoln Heights, is a neighborhood that was very highly impacted by COVID. Lots of economic loss, lots of traumatic loss, very bad health outcomes for folks during COVID, not COVID. And so I just started marching around my neighborhood with my dog and bothering all the grandmas on my street and asking them if they needed help, because I had had this experience of how hard it was for me. And I'm a good systems navigator. I had confidence. I knew I could keep going. I had time. And I thought, that's not what all of my neighbors has. So I just put a sign up on my gate that said, if you need help making a vaccine appointment, call me. And then my cell phone exploded. And then I started putting it on Nextdoor, and then my cell phone exploded. And then, as all great things happen now, in a Facebook chat, very too early on a Saturday morning, I was talking about some of the frustrations I was facing trying to book appointments for my neighbors with some friends who were having a hard time booking their eligible by age parents for the vaccine. They also had good internet, time off, resources, training, all those things that you need to get stuff in LA and in the world. And so I just said, why can't we kind of utilize the existing get out the vote infrastructure? We were all there on our laptops, making calls, calling all over the world, because I thought, if this is happening in Los Angeles, in the areas that have already been hardest hit by COVID, and that the areas hardest hit by COVID are the ones with the least saturation of vaccination, despite eligibility, something is very, very wrong here. And so in that conversation, I was introduced to a woman named Julie Brooks, who also works taking care of kids and families. So if you want anything solved, get a child care person or education person on it, because we're scrappy and resourceful. And we had a quick conversation about starting a Facebook page that offered tips and tricks and support. And we could be there to be sort of swim buddies for people if they needed it. And within about 2 days, that Facebook group blew to be about 1,000 people. And the people that were on there needed so much more help than tips or tricks could do. So we very quickly set up a request line. And originally I had an idea of, like, we'd be staffing it and answering it live, like Lily Tomlin, at the operator board. That was crazy. So we created a Google Voice helpline, a request line, and then created a system to track those requests so volunteers could call people back and book those appointments for them. So within 2 days, we had a website, we had a request line, we had flyers up and distributed that were just the phone number, not my cell phone anymore, because my phone had melted by that point with so many calls. And I did our first training on February 13th. And that training was about the logistics of how to book an appointment, the information you need or don't need from someone, how to just navigate how complex it was. And February 13th was the Hunger Games times of appointment making. It was impossible to get appointments. And especially the folks that we were working with, they were ones that had extra barriers, not just not good internet. So there's a lot of conversation right now about how not having a computer or not having internet access was really disruptive for people trying to book those appointments. That was this little bit of the story. The real story was the folks we were working with who might have been non-US nationals, might have been working as part of the informal economy, didn't have those things that tie them to where they live and how they work. And so eligibility by occupation or by zip code or by age, and then the ability to prove that turned out to be very different things. So we were running requests, we were able to book people, and we started realizing how hard it was to book people around their childcare needs, their transportation needs. We would have calls from folks who said, I will be fired from my job if I don't get this vaccine, but I haven't been given time off to get this vaccine. And so we were handed these really difficult situations. And so within about a week, our work turned from sort of, I'm not going to say charity work, because that was kind of already, we were already like into service work. Charity implies like there's us and them. Service implies like I'm going to do this lift with you. But we went from service to justice work very quickly. Those of us who were running the request line and really identifying what was going on for people, and then the barriers that were so insurmountable, and how difficult it is to be poor and underserved in Los Angeles, and how your contact with healthcare systems is just one point of that. And so shifting to justice work meant we started knocking down barriers, not just being aware of them. So shifting to justice work meant we started escorting people to sites. If folks were being turned away, we would go with them. We would have a volunteer who spoke a language they were most comfortable in go with them. If someone was turned away, we would have a sort of flurry of activity, all done in the spirit of learning and growing, which I say now, but I don't think I was that nice at the time, giving feedback to site managers or clinic managers or pharmacy managers if someone was turned away despite their eligibility. So we saw access improve that way. We would do a lot of being live on speakerphone with people and just pushing people through and kind of demanding to speak to someone who could be a decision maker if someone had been turned away. We got really, really good at sharing out the information that the county was giving to the public about what documentation was acceptable. A letter from a faith-based organization or a community organization was fine. It didn't have to be formal ID. And I know Melissa will talk a lot about this, because a number of the folks that she helped were folks that didn't have that formal ID. So I'll let you talk about that, because it's a doozy. And so we started, our work pivoted from just running this request line to trying to get as many people trained to go back as lightning rods into their communities. So a couple of cool things started to happen when we hit about 2,000 requests from our request line. Not cool thing that happened was our entire system crashed completely, and it was just like, sprung out like an old car. And we were like, well, we got to get a new one. So we improved our system. We improved how people were transcribing and tracking voicemails and doing outreach and simplified it. But then we also started adjusting the training to really focus on those individuals in our volunteer collective who had transitioned from someone we had helped to someone who was helping us. So we got so many volunteers from people who said, hey, my great aunt just got vaccinated and she said it was you guys, and like, let me help you. So all of a sudden, it wasn't just like a bunch of nice ladies from Los Feliz. We're very nice. And I don't live in Los Feliz. We weren't stuck with our own barrier of not necessarily all of us being as highly participatory in these communities that needed help. We all of a sudden had these lightning rods of folks who could do the training and then get those flyers up, do their canvassing, do that outreach, and work their own networks. So the average number of referrals that every volunteer got when they did a referral from our helpline, our request line, was about 30, which means, and we were all using our own cell phones for this. We were delighted to talk to everybody, which means every one person that's tracked on our request line, which now is about 3,500. The average was between 30 and 50 individual personal referrals, which said to me the most important part about all of this, which is the narratives of care that individuals who are highly impacted by COVID and underserved bring back into the communities where they are the experts and they are the lightning rods and they are the ones in their communities that people go to for advice and guidance and counsel. If we could make sure that we took care of them in a way that was so complete, including doing follow-up after they had the appointment, if they had any problems, fixing those problems, they could return to their communities where they're the experts and they are the leaders in their families and churches and faith-based organizations and say, it was good. It was okay. I was okay. And a lot of the folks that we were helping aren't folks who have ever been able to say, I was well taken care of. I was okay during that intersection with a system. Our systems that we all kind of take for granted and navigate with a lot of skill aren't accessible for everyone. So once we understood what was happening, and I had a moment the other day, I was driving with my daughter and we were driving by a Home Depot and I saw someone putting up flyers and I thought that font looks familiar, and our flyers are available to download from the website. And I pulled over and it was someone. I was like, hey, do you volunteer with Get Out the Shot? He said, no, I just did the training. I don't do their spreadsheet thing. I was like, my spreadsheet thing. And he said, but I did the training and learned how to do it. And I have booked over 200 of my neighbors in my apartment building by using the training. And so that's another narrative that we've heard. Again, if we give people accessible training and teach them how to navigate a system and teach them how to push through and how to take care of people, that spreads and grows. So feeling these moments, and I know Melissa is doing it too, I know Belinda's doing it too, people using like that little bit of knowledge or crowdsourcing help that they get to then go in and work their own networks or, follow that chain of folks that they've been helping. That's exactly as it was intended. So the sphere of influence of our work is solely because, and we've gotten a lot of people vaccinated, and it's only because every volunteer working with me, except one who I had to let go with love. It was fine, but hundreds and hundreds of people understood right away that there's no us and them. There's no othering of the folks that we were helping, and that nothing has to be just a logistical, perfunctory, administrative task, that it is relational, caregiving work, even if we never meet people, even if we're just on the phone with them, that relational work takes us from service into justice work and allows us to go through all of our days. You can't unknow what you know once you've talked deeply to people about what their experiences are. As a person who has been highly impacted by COVID and highly impacted by, health and wellness justice issues, and has not had the opportunity to have a healthy, safe family during COVID or before or after. So there's now this group of people who started like, yeah, appointments are hard. I'm good on a computer, who have in them, just like, you can't come take that vaccine out of me, it's in me, now have in them this understanding and this ability to see their neighbors in Los Angeles and in other cities. That's one of the really nice things that's happened is we have made the all of our materials and systems and process docs available to anyone who wants it. So we are now have little chapters up now in 37 cities. I just met with some folks in Toronto because eventually Canada also will have vaccine. They're going to set up a similar system because everyone has identified that there are people who fall through the cracks and the cracks and the cracks. And it is no coincidence that those are also the people who have had the most devastating outcomes from COVID. So we use something called the California Healthy Places Index, which I call the California Unhealthy Places Index, because we use it to look at health outcome data to identify places to canvass and do outreach. It's this really great way of looking at Los Angeles and looking at California and having that reality set in of like, oh, within the same zip code in a slightly different neighborhood, the empty tables, the empty dinner tables that are coming up over the next years because of the loss that families have endured from COVID look really different here than they look here. And as a person who cares about families and kids and taking care of everyone, if there was anything that I could do in this moment to prevent another empty seat at a dinner table, I was darn sure I was going to do it, and was lucky that so many people interested in the same work magnetized to us right away and just kept running. So one of the things that also is very interesting about this work for me is I like rules. I'm a rules person. I like systems and filling out forms and doing it right. And all of a sudden I'm there on the internet saying to people, just don't worry about it. Just put fake numbers in. Just keep going, keep going. Don't put a fake name in. Who cares? Keep going, keep going. And it was like my watching some of the, we have one volunteer who's so amazing. She's a Rotary president, and like watching her transition from like, it has to be right to Robin Hood has been just like so incredible. But it's when you start to talk to people and start to connect with them and hear their stories and hear these barriers and how they're actually insurmountable, you understand that all this talk of vaccine hesitancy is not hesitancy, it's access. And we as helpers could find ways to make access available to people in all these different creative ways. And that was the way we could start influencing vaccination rates in the communities that were most deeply impacted. So just this Sunday, we had a mobile pop-up vaccination event that took place at Pueblo del Rio Public Housing in Los Angeles. It's in Council District 9. And if you don't know what Pueblo del Rio Public Housing is, it is a housing project. All the residents refer to it as the projects. And so we got a mobile vaccine site set up in the playground on the campus and did a couple days of canvassing, going door to door, telling people, we are bringing this to you. And this pilot was a way for us to sort of poke around the edges of, can we reach the people that are still unreached now that appointments are easy, supply is good. You walk into a CVS, you say, give me a test, give me the shot. That was not the case before with our appointment booking work. We needed to navigate the appointment system. Now you just like stand around and go, can that hit me? Okay, great, now I'm vaccinated. So what happens is the people that were left behind, again, are the people who have had the most pernicious harms from COVID, and have been the most underserved by the vaccine outreach. So, you know, whenever I'm talking to a larger organization and they say, well, what's your zip code data on the folks that you've helped? And I said, let me tell you, there are no surprises. There's not a single surprise. Here's the zip code data, but there are no surprises that folks who had the worst outcomes from COVID are the folks having the lowest saturation of vaccination. So now we are partnering with all sorts of clinical programs, community hospitals, to go and bring vaccination directly to where people live. And if we have to go door to door in order to do that, to reach folks who are homebound, we have a lot of support from these clinics who also know they have reached the end of the list of folks who can come to them. So this new chapter of Get Out the Shot is bring out the shot. You know, we are bringing it right to where people are. And also, I'm sure you've been tracking this in the news, especially if you know or have kind of middle schoolish aged kids, that our kids are going to be available for the Pfizer vaccine in the next couple of weeks. So we're actually creating, in partnership with Kedron Community Health, which has been such a leader in vaccination outreach, so incredible. We're creating a mobile, I made a joke to the vaccine director, Dr. Abraham. I said, can we just have an ice cream truck and go from block to block? And he's like, yeah, let's make that happen. So now I'm actually working with some production folks who are going to wrap, right now the van, that the mobile vaccine clinic looks like an FBI murder van. Like, it's horrible. Like, it is not a place that a kid wants to go. So we're going to I was like, oh, I want it to look like those, mobile libraries from the 70s when I was growing up. I've now very clearly anchored myself as being quite middle-aged with the mobile library and with Fast Times at Ridgemont High, fine. And so we're going to actually create that, and it's going to go from school to school and neighborhood to neighborhood and catch all of those kids whose parents want them to get that vaccine, but don't have the time off to get to work, don't have childcare for their other kids. We are going to bring it like the ice cream truck that goes to where people are. So that's the turn that Get Out the Shot is taking. And it's kind of like moving, the first 90% of moving is really easy. And it's that last 10% that's really a bear. And we're in the last 10%. And I need help. I need help from systems navigators, and I need help from people who are comfortable and, as cozy, being as much of a loudmouth as I am and going up and talking to people and canvassing. And I need people who are excellent systems navigators who can help coordinate all the complexities of bringing a mobile clinic to a place, talking to the housing authority office, talking to a council district, all of that. So if you have an interest right now in helping this last 10% of this big lift that we have to do, it is the population that is hardest to reach with vaccines that will have the greatest benefit in health outcomes if we can get to them. So this is my invitation to you. I am going to be doing a canvassers training on Friday of this week. I'm kind of adjusting some of our training from just focused on appointments to how we actually get out there. And also we have very cool yellow t-shirts. And so if you think that you look good in yellow, I don't, but that was the color that was free with the t-shirt. So now I love the yellow. Then I think that you should join us. And even if you have never done outreach, even if you never have set foot into public housing, even if that is not your world, I promise that we will give you a lane and the support and the permission to help people right now. And that was the first thing that I figured out when our first volunteers came together in early February with Get Out the Shot, is everyone was aching to help. And it wasn't that they didn't know how, they didn't know they were allowed. And the secret was I wasn't allowed either, but I just kind of kept going, and this thing has built around me because of the efforts of volunteers like Melissa, which I think is my segue to hand over to Melissa so she can talk a little bit about her work and her story and the work she's been doing directly within her community. And then I'll be here for questions at the end if we have any.
Thank you, Liz. Very big footsteps to follow. My story is kind of like Liz's, shrunk down. Like almost all the components are the same. It was my first time hearing it from you, but similar. Mine started when my parents became eligible to get the vaccine. They were super excited. The governor announced it, and it was like they had no idea where to get it. And I thought, okay, like I'm a lawyer, I have a desk job, I'm in front of my computer all day. Like if I can't figure out how to do this, nobody can figure it out. And I couldn't freaking figure it out. It took me like a day or two. I ended up calling around doctors' offices. Finally, one of the nurses told me where she had gotten vaccinated, which was a Ralph's. We got my parents an appointment, and it was canceled. I got my parents an appointment at a clinic. That batch of dose was contaminated, and it was canceled. And so it was, when it's your own family, that was sort of my hook into it. It was like, I deeply cared about this. Finally, we got them vaccinated. And then it became like this word of mouth thing where there was the rabbi at my temple needed a vaccine. We had we still have a construction project going on in our backyard with all kinds of people coming in and out, many of whom don't speak English. And like, as I became better and better at booking these vaccine appointments, it occurred to me like, well, wait a minute, if it's hard for me to book this, and Hunger Games is exactly the right analogy. It was really, it was like war getting these appointments. How are these people going to do it who are not in front of a computer all day? Many of them don't speak English. Many of them don't even know that they're eligible for the vaccine. And so I just kind of became like a one-woman, this is before I was connected with Liz, became like a one-woman vaccine show. So I would kind of like walk out into my backyard every day with my laptop and be like, hey, does anybody here have a pre-existing condition? Hey, what kind of job do you have? And be like, oh, I do like Uber Eats on the side. I'm like, do you know you're eligible for the vaccine? Where do you live? And I ended up getting a lot of people vaccinated that way. I also volunteered at a megapod really early, which is how I got my vaccine early. And just the process of like how meaningful it was to me. Like I cried, I was so happy to get it. I saw people turned away because there were computer glitches and they had legitimate appointments, but it was printed out wrong and they were in tears. I saw like lots of stuff happen that day. And that combined with trying to get a home healthcare worker who did not speak English and did not drive vaccinated. I drove her to Magic Mountain. We waited forever. She was turned away because they didn't like her documentation. We went to a Ralph's. She was turned away because she was not licensed through an agency. This is all on the same day. We then got her an appointment. I got her an appointment at Dodger Stadium. We waited 3 hours. We were the last appointment of the day. They took pity on us. They got her vaccinated. And I was like, wait, if it took 9 hours to get this one person vaccinated, there's so many other people that need help. And so I started putting myself out there, and I posted in LA Mommies, which has like 40,000 people, LA Jewish Mommies, Central Casting, because my kids act. I just kind of like made my own network, and people hit, tons of people needed help, had no idea where to start. I talked to the principal at my kid's school. I got all of them vaccinated because they were really desperate. My point in all this, before I launch into my tips, is I did not have a program. When I got connected with Liz's group, it was a lot better because a lot of these issues I was encountering myself and I didn't know how to solve, people had already solved, and I could get support. But if I'm a working mom, I have a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old, and a full-time job. If I can get between 200 and 300 people vaccinated in my full-time and in my spare time, you can too. So whoever is watching this, like, you don't need a program. You can be a hero. Like, if you think about between 200 and 300 people, like, how many of those people would have gotten COVID? Like, maybe somebody would have died. You have the ability to save people's lives. You just need to follow Liz's, like, go do her training. Don't do it my way. It took forever, but do Liz's training. Tap into the Facebook groups that she has where you can get support and you can ask your questions, and you really will save people's lives. All that being said, here are my top 10 tips. The first one is really listen to what the people are saying to you. Following their wishes is what's going to get them to the appointment, and it's what's going to get the vaccine in their arm. At the beginning, I would think in my head, and these are real examples, like, what do you mean you only want Pfizer because that's what the doctors are getting? Like, what do you mean you only want J&J because the others are going to make you infertile? What do you mean it has to be a drugstore when there's a community clinic like right next to your house? Like, I wanted the shot so badly, I would have driven to, Fresno to get it, but not everybody feels that way. And the way to get people vaccinated is just to listen. People have their preferences. This is something that's going in their body. This is their health, and just listen. The other thing, and Liz touched on this, is for some people, it is a matter of being employed. Like, I helped a guy get vaccinated whose employer told him, if you take time off to get the COVID shot, you're fired. There's no voter protection. There's nothing for this. He got it anyway and went back, and they said, and if you go for your second dose, you're fired. And he was like, look, I'm getting the second dose. You can fire me if you want. I don't think everybody would have made that decision. I'm happy he was not fired, and I'm happy he got it. But it really is like a big issue for people. So if they say to you, I can only go at night, I can only go on Sunday, I can only go between these hours. Right now, as Liz said, there's a lot of appointments. There are nighttime appointments. There are weekend appointments. Whatever the window, I've been given a 1-hour time slot that the person can get vaccinated, and it has to be within 10 minutes walking to their house because they don't drive. You can work with all of this. And if you can't figure it out, there's a group of hundreds of people who will respond to you extremely quickly and help you figure it out. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is give choices. So I have had people say to me, like, I only want Moderna and it has to be an Encino. And then I'll say to them, okay, that's fine. I can get you into the Encino CVS, next Saturday for Moderna. But just so you know, like, if you're willing to drive 10 minutes to the CVS in Reseda with Moderna, you can get it today. And a lot of people will say, like, oh, really? Well, I'll get it today. And honor their choices. Do not judge, and be, presented in a very agnostic way. That's my suggestion. But in my experience, half the time, people, when they're presented with a choice, actually realize that they want it quickly. And my general philosophy is the sooner it's in somebody's body, the better, because so much happens. Places run out, batches get contaminated, people's cars break down, people get lost. I mean, literally, I've had all these things happen. People can't get a ride, their childcare falls through. Like, if they're able to get somewhere sooner, that's usually the better choice. My third tip is, do not cancel. If you have an existing appointment for someone and you end up getting them a second one, and I'll explain why, the second first dose appointment, do not cancel that first appointment until the shot is in their arm. And here's what I mean. I've had people where, and again, this is when it was harder to get appointments, but still, I'd say, like, okay, I was able to get you one, in a week. And then I look again and I'm able to get them one tomorrow. Don't cancel that first one a week out until after they get the first one, because all that stuff that I just said happens. Like I had a 16-year-old who went, and it was supposed to be Pfizer, and Pfizer's what it said on the website. And they got there and they're like, we ran out, but we do have Johnson & Johnson, and he can't get it because he's 16. So I didn't cancel that second appointment. So he went and got the second appointment. That being said, once that person has the first dose in the arm, cancel the second first dose appointment so somebody else can get it. But I have found, like, don't make yourself crazy. You don't have to book 10 first dose appointments for somebody. But if it plays out like that and that happens, protect the person and don't cancel that second one until the first one is administered. My next tip is to be creative and flexible. This is not a legal exam. This does not have to be perfect. A lot of the stuff Liz said, I have found for myself. Like at the beginning, like some of the websites require your mother's maiden name or your mother's first name. And in the beginning, I'd have people who'd be like, I'm not giving you my mother's maiden name. Like that will let someone hack into my bank account. Why do they want that? And I would pause and think, my God, like this is required. How am I going to get this? No, that's just what's required by their software. And it's more important to get the shot in the person's arm. So I've started writing not applicable. Or if they tell you something that doesn't totally make sense, like their mother's maiden name is the same as their last name, and they can't really explain it, it doesn't matter. As long as there's something in the system and that's the answer they give. If I don't even know what the scenario would be, but if ever they needed to look up their documentation in that medical record and that's the answer they give and it's there, it's fine. The same thing is also true with cell phones and addresses and email addresses. There are people that don't have any of that stuff. So I have become extremely flexible. They can put their friend's cell phone number. They can put their work address. I've done my cell phone number and my address. I mean, people have to do what they're comfortable with, but you don't want that to be the barrier. Your desire to follow the rules to be the barrier to them getting the shot. So just get creative, get outside your, white collar lawyerness and figure it out. The last thing is in that vein, and Liz may have specific rules for her program, and I don't want to go against it, but you can drive them. You're just a person. This isn't like, it's not like, practicing law where there's like a malpractice policy and you can't go outside of it and you have to do this. Like I've totally thrown people in my car and driven them to appointments because they have no other way to get there or their transportation has fallen through, and it's fine. I guess it's on me if we get in a car accident and I'm willing to assume that liability, which I am, but just you're scrappy, you got through law school or you're about to get through law school, like make it happen. The next tip I have, and again, for Liz's program, do whatever she says, but I have found text to be optimal. People, it's kind of like you in your regular life. Like I often don't want to call people and talk to them because I don't have time. I just want to text them. For people who are slower in responding or just kind of cagey about the whole thing, texts are just so non-committal and easy. I have my own little intake form that's like not punctuated or capitalized because that makes people feel more at ease. And it's short. And I kind of text them like, yeah, here's the information I need. And they text it back. And there's a lot of texting. I find it helps. There are sometimes you need to call, like if something is wrong or you encounter an obstacle, then do call. But I have found texting to be like a very gateway drug, easy thing into this process. Tip number 6 is I like to if I do talk to them on the phone, and especially if they have something that's really hard, like they don't have a lot of documentation, or they know they can't get to the appointment perfectly on time, or they like want to go to Kaiser and request a certain kind, but Kaiser won't tell you in advance what kind you're going to get. Give them a speech about being gritty and not talking too much. So I tell them like, look, there's a million places in LA to get this shot. I know you want to go to Kaiser and get Pfizer, and it's right next to your house, so let's do it. But if you go to Kaiser and they don't have Pfizer that day, and you don't want to get Moderna or J&J or whatever they have, like, it's okay. Then just leave, call me, and we'll make you another appointment. You've got to be gritty in this process. Or if you're turned away because you don't have any documentation, it's okay. And we'll find someplace else. It's not, a lot of people, if they're turned down the first time, are super gun shy about doing it again. I am not like that as a person, but a lot of people are. So if you give them that speech ahead of time, then they're less likely to be deterred if stuff happens, and stuff's going to happen. The other thing I like to tell people, some people, I'm a talker, so I don't judge really, but don't talk too much. It's like, I was a litigator for 6 years. If you go to court and you've won the tentative, like shut up. Don't go in and try to argue yourself out of a win. If you have somebody who has like some iffy documentation or whatever, don't go and be like, look, I'm really on the border. I just turned 16 today. Like, is it really okay for me to just don't talk? Just go answer their questions, get the shot and leave. Because a lot of these workers are volunteers. They don't know the rules. They're super scared of messing up the rules. A lot of them are on power trips. They want to turn you down. Like, don't give them a reason. Just don't talk too much. Number 7, you will hear when things go bad, not when they go well. So at the beginning, I would follow up with everybody and be like, did you get the shot? Did you get the shot? Did you get the shot? Right after. And it kind of felt like I was fishing for compliments or something, which I wasn't trying to do, but I was genuinely concerned whether they got the shot. And then I learned after a bunch of these, you don't really have to do that unless you want to, because you will definitely hear about it if something goes wrong. They will reach out to you usually and ask for help resolving it. Tip number 8, you are not out of the woods until they get the second dose. So my nephew went and got his first dose 3 weeks ago, Pfizer, and he went to get his second dose yesterday, and they were out of Pfizer, but they had Moderna. That happens. It's a long story. He did have a backup appointment, so that was good. And we didn't cancel it because he didn't have the second dose in his arm. So that worked out fine. But second dose issues happen. Educate yourself about the rules. I think technically the grace period the CDC has said is 4 days before or 2 weeks after. 4 days before is sticky. I have done that a few times. Once was like an elderly person who had a really hard time getting there, and he got his 4 days ahead of time successfully. But I have had a couple people turned away for going more than exactly on their second dose date. So I would say, because people just don't know the guidelines, if you can, stick to the second dose date or up to 2 weeks after. If you absolutely have to, then just give your gritty speech to the person and hopefully it will be okay. But you will hear from people 3 and 4 weeks after, because second dose stuff does happen. Things get contaminated, things run out. The places that give those doses do have an obligation to take care of the people and give them a second dose, but they don't sometimes. I mean, my in-laws got their first dose at Ralph's and their second dose was canceled, and Ralph's was kind of like, yeah, we're out. So you may have to figure it out again for the person on their second dose. Tip 9, do not take risks when you have someone who has been hard to book. I have one fail in this, and it's still a fail in this story, and here it is. I went to high school with someone. She's Latina. She's a single mom. It was very hard for her to go get her shot because she doesn't have any support taking care of her child. After months of texting with her, we finally got her an appointment extremely close to her house at a community clinic, but she told me she could not make it exactly at that time. It would be a little late. I called, I couldn't get a hold of anybody at the clinic. It's not close to my house. I went to the hive mind on these Facebook groups, and people generally think community clinics are accommodating. This one was not. She got there more than 10 minutes late. They turned her away. She has never gone back. I have never been able to get her to commit to another appointment. And, it bothers me. And so don't let that happen to you. If I were to do it again, I would have booked her at a drugstore or something, and I would have had her wait longer to make sure it was an appointment that she could meet with her timing. Then that's not true for everybody. If you have somebody who's like, yeah, I can't make it on time, but if it doesn't work out, I can go again next week, cool, then go for it. Because most community clinics are pretty flexible. But if you have somebody that like you've just really had trouble connecting with them, or they don't have a lot of documentation or whatever, I say wait a little longer and go for the sure thing, or you're going to end up like me in the story, and it does not feel good sleeping at night with this person not vaccinated. My second tip with this, it's a double tip. If you have somebody who's hard to reach, I do not recommend booking at a Megapod or Carbon Health. I love Carbon Health, but it requires authentication. So when you book the Carbon Health appointment and when you book a Megapod appointment, it wasn't always like this, but it became like this. They will text the person a code, and you have to enter the code to continue with the appointment. I've had a few times with people where I'm like, my kids fall asleep. It's like 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, I can book a few right now. I go to do it, and they don't answer their phone, or I know they're elderly and I cannot call them at 11:30 at night. So if you are booking someone that's hard to reach, I recommend anything with CalVax, which is most of the community clinics, because it's super simple to book. CVS. I don't know if Walgreens has gone to authentication. I think I heard somewhere maybe, but I haven't booked Walgreens in a while. So that's my tip. Go to a Megapod and don't do Carbon Health if it's someone who's hard to reach and you're booking it at like an odd time of day.
Is
Um,
CVS now? It's CV. Sorry to interrupt.
no,
CVS. You can walk in without an appointment to any CVS, right? So if you're with if you have somebody who has a schedule that's tricky or anything like that, we can tell them, or at least I have been, I think, based on the press release that I saw, that you can go to any CVS and get vaccinated immediately.
So let me jump in on that because I want to connect that piece and what Melissa was talking about as sort of a larger ethos piece of,
Yeah,
especially when we're helping our really vulnerable neighbors or neighbors with
yeah,
more barriers. Even though walk-ins are an option, the more vulnerable someone is, the more of a sure thing I create. And so I have now made over 2,000 appointments. Appointments are like falling from the sky. And if I have someone who has a childcare barrier, a wage loss barrier, meaning the amount of time they have to miss work to get the shot impacts their ability to feed or take care of their family. That's a significant wage loss barrier. Who is working in the informal economy, doesn't have PTO, like a million barriers, no transpo. I will still get an appointment despite the fact that there are openings. So just to really echo what Melissa was saying, if you've got someone who's easy breezy and flexible and won't feel it won't create more hesitancy or humiliation. We protect a lot of our folks from the humiliation of being turned away. And so the more vulnerable someone is, the more I want that appointment. And for someone who was really vulnerable, like an elder or someone who was really on the fence, I would call and be on the phone with that person the entire time. So someone who's like, how do I do this? Say, go to CVS, go to Ralph's, go to all of them are going to be no appointment. Someone who has a bit of fragility or an experience in contacting a system that didn't take care of them, lock them in with the appointment. I will drive around with someone and print out, because if you don't, most of the folks didn't have printers at home. So we'll crowdsource, hey, can you print this confirmation and drop it in someone's mailbox? Do you live by the Forum? Do you live over in Echo Park? And we'll get things out to people. So I call it in the trainings, I call it the paper armor. And so for someone to go in with that like robust feeling of this is mine, I deserve it, I have it, it's so like really, really, really important. And so when
that's
you've
a
got
great
someone
point.
bouncy and resilient and, has that grit, like Melissa's talking about, great, they can bounce back. The other piece, just as a quick tag on this, is, and Melissa, it sounds like you do this too, when you give that sort of resilient speech, we also walk people through exactly what's going to happen, because I have had people get halfway through the line, panic because they weren't sure where to go next, and then call me and say, I couldn't get it. And so I started with the folks I was booking for. And as part of the training, even if you've never been to that site, in the hive mind, like Melissa has been referring to, you can say, what's it like at the Forum? What's it like at Magic Mountain? And you can walk a person through, you're going to park here, someone in an orange vest is going to do this, and then another person's going to do this, and then they'll check you in. And that's a remover of that fear or hesitancy barrier. So that all is related to like how many pillows we can tape to someone to protect them through this process. But yeah, you got someone bouncy, throw them in at CVS. Everything is going to be no appointment coming up really soon. But appointments will still be available for folks who need that precious sureness and sure-footedness as they go through, or me on the cell phone yelling at them, not at them, at the manager who's turning them away. You don't want to get yelled at by me. I'm super nice, except when I am not. Nobody wants that.
Now, those are all great points. And I have a friend a childhood friend who had COVID very early in the pandemic. And though she's been eligible, hadn't gotten the vaccine because she was very concerned about side effects. She said she felt like she had PTSD about how sick she had been. And so she knew she could go to CVS actually. And I mentioned it to her. But she said, I feel like I need an appointment because I need to know what day and time it's going to be so I can kind of steel myself for it. And so I made her appointment, and she just got her vaccine on Friday, and she messaged me afterwards that she was so happy. And she said it was so, she said, I know it sounds silly. She's literally a rocket scientist. She's, super educated and has access to everything, but she said she just couldn't sort of put the wheels together make the appointment because she thought she was sort of signing herself up for side effects. I also told her about my experience, just personally, anecdotally, which is I was lucky not to have side effects from either shot, and she got her shot, and so I know that across the spectrum, there's all kinds of reasons to book appointments. Just wanted to put that plug in for if you know people who are saying like, oh, I don't know when I'm going to get around to that or whatever, that CVS has opened up nationwide without appointments.
Great to know. I only have one last tip and then a bit about outreach. My last tip is know when to get help. As I've said, I've done like somewhere between 200 and 300 of these, and I thought I had seen it all until I got to the non-US nationals. And that is really, and I don't speak Spanish. I took French in high school, really dumb. Should have taken Spanish. I didn't know what to do. That is when these Facebook groups, the Get Out the Shot Los Angeles COVID-19 hub and the GOTSLA volunteers Facebook groups were super helpful to me. The big thing with non-US nationals is exactly what Liz said, which is documentation is like their armor, and you want to build it up. So any photo ID they have, a Costco card. This morning I helped somebody who only had a photo ID that's their rehab card, nothing else. Anything. I mean, like their Knott's Berry Farm season pass. Anything that has their photo ID would be awesome. They don't have to have a photo ID, but any mail that comes to their house, their cell phone bill, their junk mail, and then like anything that they can do to have a bunch of pieces of paper in their hand to kind of spread on the desk, probably not with COVID, put in their hands, fan out in their hands in front of the person and show that they actually live at this address in LA County, you can get the shot, is helpful. And if they don't have that, you make it happen. You send them a bunch of mail, use different fonts, use different color envelopes, whatever. Help them get established at that address and go in and show this. They should not need any of this, but places are sticky, places make their own rules, and you want them to feel prepared and not get turned away and not never go back, as in my one story. And I would say if you do get a non-US national, even if you kind of feel like you know what you're doing, you should ask for help on these groups, and especially with respect to location. With mine, I've done a couple. I got them Johnson & Johnson because they also had transportation issues and it was hard for them to go back. And we wanted it to happen one time successfully because doing it 2 times was difficult. And the person was open to Johnson & Johnson. I would never impose, any of that on anybody. And then because I posted it in the Facebook groups, I was able to get a Spanish speaking volunteer to meet them there. So they texted her when they were there, and then she met them there and literally walked them through the process, which makes people like that feel very comfortable and taken care of. And that's what you want. My last bit, and it sounds like this is where the Get Out the Shot group is going also, is just with respect to outreach. I know it seems weird. It seems like you're sort of like the awkward person, like asking people out on a date or something. I don't know what it is, but I just do it anyway. I went up to my gardener and was like, hey, have you gotten vaccinated? Like, you want to get vaccinated? I mean, maybe don't walk out with your laptop the first time, but just like ask people like, hey, neighbor, how's it going? You gotten vaccinated? You want some help making the appointment? The construction project's been a big way that I've done it. Like I said, I posted in a bunch of totally unrelated Facebook groups. I'm about to do my keto group, which should be interesting. You out there, you have your own unique network, tap into it in whatever style suits you best. Because a lot of these people, I mean, this morning, a person I helped at our construction site get vaccinated was so casual about it. I was taken aback. I was like, hey, do you want help getting vaccinated? Do you want a vaccine shot? Shot? And he was like, yeah, but can I finish my sandwich first? So even though it might be important to you and it feels like everything to you having gotten vaccinated, some of these people, it is not at the forefront of their mind. They may want it, but they have other priorities like making a living and keeping a roof over their head and food on the table. So and I will also say, if you get resistance, I am not the shot police. Like I've offered it to people and I've gotten back, like, I don't want that death shot, or, and it's like, cool. And then you let people make their own decisions. You're just here to help and to be a resource. And say yes, by the way, say yes when asked if you'll help other people, because often I'll help somebody and they'll be like, my God, can I call my girlfriend? Can you do her on the phone? I'm like, totally. And I have a deadline. I don't have time, but I do it anyway, because you're never going to get the person back. Or they'll be like, oh my God, can my cousin text you? Can my friend's cousin's uncle, the answer is yes. That's how you get people vaccinated. And then they will contact you and they will contact you. And then you'll be at 300 people. So if I can do it, anybody out there can do it.
And I think, Melissa, you are really kind of living that example of how that care and giving people that access allows them to go back into their networks where they are the lightning rod, the fulcrum, the expert. They are the one that changes the opinion of the cousins and the friends and the coworkers, and community members. And so again, the other, we recognize that when it's good and powerful. We have to recognize the other side of that coin when it is bad and powerful, which is those stories of turned away and all of that, those narratives where things don't go okay and someone is treated badly or treated disrespectfully. Those narratives are just as potent in a way that we don't want. So around the outreach, I just also want to support what you're saying about if someone is not interested, leave them alone, especially if you are not a trusted voice from within that network, within that community. We have no way of knowing what people's beliefs and expectations and experiences are. And what we can do as folks who've decided, here's our narrow little dedicated lane where we can do stuff right now, because of COVID and not being able to do stuff to help people, we can do this. What we can do is take care of people so well and so carefully and so graciously and with so much protection and honor for their experience and what they need and they want, that those narratives eventually reach back out to that person who was hesitant. And so whenever when someone says, well, what do you guys do about hesitancy? Are you out giving information? No, we are not a community organization that is expert in that community at taking care of those folks before COVID. And so I say very clearly that our role in hesitancy work is just access, because that story of someone who had a good experience, who was escorted, who was helped, who had this thing, that story gets back to the person who's not interested. And so we want to prevent those stories of people being humiliated, turned away, dishonored, and so preventing those outcomes. One of the things I just wanted to address, I agree with you that not calling people and bugging them is really good. I do a very quick follow-up with everyone, which is, were they nice to you? That's all. I don't say, I say, I'll call, and I still stick with the follow-up because I randomly do it from the spreadsheet. I do it from my own networks. I kind of have to peek in at the sauce a little bit and make sure the volunteers are doing things like that. They're all operating like little mini Liz's out in the world. It's my dream. And so I'll ask, that's my only question. Were they kind to you? Were they nice to you? Did they take good care of you? Because if that answer is no, you will believe that whatever good systems navigating I have to do to figure out the person who is actually in charge of how people behave at those sites, those volunteers, as Melissa mentioned, some folks early on, especially at the mega sites, were maybe just volunteering in order to get that vaccine and they weren't trained with access in mind. That's why I stopped sending vulnerable people to megapods and to places that didn't understand how to bring people in for care. So the follow-up is not, how did you feel? Did you have side effects? They can tell me that if they want. The follow-up that I do is, were they good to you? Because an answer of no means someone is about to get a flurry of Liz at their corporate level that they were highly not prepared for. But I will say that I do it the other way too. So, there was a Vons in Thousand Oaks that accommodated someone who had a million issues, and it was like a whole problem. And they were so kind. And this person was really struggling to navigate all of these points. And the piece that I heard, even translated through this person that was struggling as the person getting the appointment, was how kind and respectful and diligent the whole staff was. And so I made sure to call Vaughn's corporate and be like, hi, you're used to hearing me when you guys are bad, but you were really good today. So I make sure to do it the other way too. We also, through Get Out the Shot, provide kind of direct support and love to the community organizations and clinics. We send a lot of donuts and bagels and pizza to the places doing the vaccine site, so we can kind of take care of the caretakers as well. So I just didn't want it to sound like my only connection and follow up with places as if they, violate the rights or protected sphere I want around all of our neighbors. It's if they do a good job, they hear from me too. I wish that I had more stories about how people were amazing. It's usually like they were fine or they messed up. And that work feels important too. But yeah, definitely honoring what Melissa is saying about not hounding people. But I do bug a little to make sure that everybody was nice.
That makes sense, especially if it informs who you're sending there shortly thereafter, right? So,
Yep.
yeah. Great. So we don't have any open questions, but I've dropped the links for the Get Out the Shot LA website, the flyer, your flyers specifically in English and Spanish. I think I saw you mention somewhere that you have other languages that
Yeah.
just aren't on the website, right? If people need if they know that there's a prominent language in their neighborhood or where they're going to canvas, that they can access
We
that.
now have it translated into 12 languages. And so, yeah, just email GOTS. Oh, can we put the Get Out the Shot email in there too?
Yeah.
So it's gots.losangeles@gmail.com. And it's just me. There's no like, it's whenever someone is like, your organization, I'm like, it's just me. It's just me. And, you know, one of the reasons that we've stayed an unfunded collective, a sort of mutual aid organization, is that we're just neighbors helping neighbors. Like, we are not bound by the rules. I think Melissa talked about this in kind of shaking off the fear of doing something wrong or taking on liability. One of the largest purposes was to just do this work right now and not think about the next 10 things or that. And so we've remained an unfunded collective. The only time that we do fundraise specifically to get materials for outreach that we use from week to week. Like, we bought Kedron some easy ups for their mobile clinics, and then also to send bagels to all the vaccinators. So those are the two funding streams we have, and they get used up really quickly. But because we've remained an unfunded grassroots volunteer collective, I am doing the same for someone who calls into my request line as I would be doing for a neighbor. I just wanted to help out. And it's given us an enormous footprint and freedom to help at a speed that feels right to me, which is fast and a lot. I like to help the way I like to talk, fast and a lot. Yeah.
Well, I can't say enough good things about the work that you all have done and all the other volunteers have done in helping to make access meaningful. Some of the access was on paper only, and you all have made that real for a lot of people who wanted to get vaccinated, but just, didn't have the resources to connect the dots. So thank you for everything that you've done. And I'm hoping that we'll get you some assistance here from this training. And any similar projects out there that you all encounter, either through this work that you're doing, Liz and Melissa, or our volunteers who are listening, to the potential volunteers who are watching this training, always feel free to bring those to BHBA, because we have a lot of people who want to do community service and want to be helpful. And this is just a great opportunity to do that. So thank you for all of your work. Thank you all of your colleagues for all of their work. And we'll look forward to sharing this online and getting you some more boots on the ground to really help make those connections.
Thank you.
Thank you both.